be here with you at your 2012 annual meeting. Sandy, thank you very much for kicking us off appropriately with high energy. I would like to take a moment to actually recognize and thank Sandy for his leadership that we've had over the course of the past year. Sandy has been incredibly thoughtful, very engaged with others in the industry. He's represented us masterfully in a lot of different industry forums, and certainly has earned my respect and respect of the NTCA staff. So I'd like all of us to give Sandy a big round of applause for his leadership. Very clear is that challenging times really does require strong leadership. And what a year it has been. I know talking to a lot of you at the welcome reception, we were kind of talking about how in past years you could kind of ramp down around the holidays, ramp back up in January. And I know from talking to a lot of you that there is no off and on ramps anymore, that you're just going 24/7. And I certainly feel like our team is doing the same. Things are happening so quickly. They're happening quickly on the industry front. They're happening very quickly on the policy front. So it's going to be really important for us to all stay on top of it, to stay fresh, to keep agile, and to kind of keep thinking about where we need to go next. So with the whirlwind of activities that we have, there's a lot of different new initiatives out there, and a lot of new ideas that I think we can be working together on to create the future for rural telecommunications. We are looking forward in the course of this coming year to working with you, certainly on the policy front. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But we also need to be talking together about revenue streams. How are there ways that we can work together to increase those? Because I know that's definitely weighing on your minds. And what do we do about business partnerships? Who else can we partner with, and how can we make our voice stronger? So to that end, we've been doing a number of things at NTCA. We've been talking to folks like AT&T, trying to figure out, are there some ways that we can work with them in terms of some different initiatives on spectrum, and maybe even on backhaul. We've also been talking to CenturyLink. We'll talk to anybody. I think it's really important for us to be thinking about how do we get out there and how do we look for some other folks that we can be working with. We've also started a new initiative at NTCA that I'm really excited about. Internally, we have an Innovation Council, and it's comprised of a number of our staff members across all different divisions. And what we do is we really focus on what are the new things that we can put in front of our membership. And I don't know if any of you have gone through airports and seen something called the Smart City Initiative. And the whole idea is kind of built around what does it take to create a smart city. And we've been thinking about what would it take to create a smart rural community. What would that initiative look like? What kind of applications would be appropriate? And most importantly, how do we use the broadband networks that you've all built to actually create that rural community of the future? What is it in terms of healthcare applications or agriculture applications or distance learning? So we're very excited about pulling this initiative together. One of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be hosting a summit this spring in Washington, D.C., and we're going to be looking to invite other partners to join us for these discussions. And hopefully, have the opportunity maybe to even look to create a model rural smart community out there, and show policymakers and show other business interests the impact that rural really has on the national economy. So that's another thing that we've been looking at. We've also been talking to folks like IBM. We've been talking to folks and working with folks like our partners at NRTC. Where are there some areas that we can find some traction working together? So the other thing that we've been doing is we've been working hard on developing opportunities with government as well. I know a lot of you have been very engaged in working with us, but we've been working very hard with USDA, and obviously RUS, NTIA, Department of Commerce, and even the Department of Transportation to try to figure out where are those points of commonality that we can be working together on. This week, actually, we have an NTCA member, Venture Communication, who's being honored at the White House as part of their Innovators for Change program. And we've been invited to join them and participate in that discussion. But those are the kind of connecting the dots that we need to be doing. How do we continue to get folks to realize all that rural telephone companies are doing in their community and why we should be at the table for all of these different discussions. The other initiative that I think we've really kind of honed in on, and I know I've talked to a number of you about how important this is to me, is our third-party outreach. It's our taking the time to create a community of other interests who care about rural America, who care about rural infrastructure, and where broadband is an important part of their business plan as well. So we've been working with a number of these different groups over the course of that last year. We have a staff person who is devoted fully to creating these relationships, and we were extraordinarily pleased to see the fruits of our labor this year come to fruition when we had 15 rural-based associations join us by sending a letter to the FCC on our behalf, talking about the impact of USF reform and how important it was that the FCC did this reform right for rural America. We'll also be working with Partners for the Smart Rural Community, and we've also kind of re-engaged and we've sent some more invitations out to continue to strengthen our base. We're looking at the Association of Rural Governors, and we're looking at the Rural Voters League, and we're looking at the American Hospital Association. Where are there some other folks that we can be working with? One of the things that's been very effective for us has been all of you, because a number of you have come back to us and said, here are some folks that I'm working with in the state or back in my community that you may want to reach out to on the national level. So connecting those dots, again, continues to be very important. Because our goal is really looking at how we create the future, and how we create the future for rural telecommunications, where we need to be going as an industry, and where we need to be going as an association. So my observation is, with all the things that we've got going on the policy front, on the business shifts that you're facing, and certainly the revenue challenges, is that we need to join forces. We need to join forces to create the future that we want for rural telecommunications. And we need to create the future that we think we need for your rural communities, for your rural consumers, and making sure that rural America is able to thrive. So I know you've been going on a fast track, and I know a lot of you feel like you haven't even had a chance to catch your breath, but I am here to tell you that this is not the time for us to sit back. There's a lot of work that we all have to do right now. There is a quote that Henry Ford had that I really like, and I think is really appropriate for the time that we're in right now. He said, coming together is beginning, keeping together is progress, but working together is success. And I think that says a lot about where we need to be. So what it's going to take is it's going to take NTCA working together with all of the different companies that we have, and certainly all of the different organizations that we work with. It's also going to take all of you working with us, and working with one another, and working with your state associations, and working with state networks, and working with associate members in the vendor community. And all together, I think it's going to take all of that to create the team that we're going to need to create the future for rural telecommunications. So NTCA has been working very closely with related associations over the course of the last year. Certainly very closely over the course of last year. Obviously, we have long-term relationships on a lot of the different conferences that we put out and a lot of the different policy initiatives. These relationships are very, very important to us, and certainly to our industry-wide efforts. And that is why we are so excited about NTCA in El Paso next year hosting the Rural Telecom Industry Meeting and Expo that we'll be doing in Orlando. And I certainly hope that you will join us there. I think the meeting will be powerful. I think it will be the place to be in terms of the rural telecom industry. Sandy had mentioned this morning that the board of directors for NTCA in El Paso have been discussing some potential synergies and ways to work together in a little bit more of a formalized fashion. He's extended the invitation for you to come to these listening sessions, but I will tell you it is so important for us to hear your voice on this. The board of directors really would like to know what you're thinking. And so if you can't come to the listening sessions, I encourage you to talk to your national directors. And we also have a box out at the desk. You can certainly scribble down any comment you might have. We also have an email address that you can certainly send comments to as well. So again, I think the feedback is going to be important. You also need to know that no decisions have been made. Nothing is set in stone, and the process will be extraordinarily transparent as these discussions continue. Because, like you, NTCA has an obligation to our members to look at each and every opportunity that we see out there that can strengthen our industry and strengthen our voice. I also want to take a minute to commend the NTCA Board of Directors. They worked really hard over the course of the past year putting together a new strategic plan. And I think that this strategic plan is really going to be a terrific roadmap for our industry and our association heading into the future. You should have all received a copy of that. If you have not, we certainly have some available, or go onto our website. But I really am proud of the effort that was put forth, because it's hard when you basically try to whiteboard and say, if we could create the association that we need and the priorities that it needs to have, what would those be? Everyone here has the potential to help create the future for rural telecommunications. And it's going to require taking an active role in advocating on behalf of your company and on behalf of your consumers, to be proactive and to think outside of the box, to be innovative and get out of your comfort zone and to share with your peers and look for ways to make a difference. I had one of my friends from Bugs Island yesterday come up to me telling me how he pigeonholed a U.S. Senator on the airplane coming out to San Diego, and had the opportunity to regale him about the fact that they'd just flown over thousands of miles of country that was covered in large part by rural telecommunication providers. So I know I have my work cut out for me when I get back to Washington, D.C., since he went ahead and created an opening for me to go back. But those are the kind of opportunities we need to kind of jump at, we need to take, we need to think about how do we kind of make some of these unique situations work for us. So moving to the policy front, I know that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you here at this meeting. We're going to have a number of different sessions talking about what exactly the FCC did and what exactly does this order mean for you. I would like to share that personally I was very disappointed when the order came out. We had worked so hard to work with the rest of the industry on a consensus framework that was very tough for the NTCA members to kind of be able to come to the table with the larger carriers and the entire sector of the industry. And we had high hopes for that consensus framework, and frankly, the FCC clearly thought they knew better than we did. But I think the important thing is, one of the things we've been told time and time again is that the order is better than it would have been. However, we find that little consolation. So I want to just share with you that we're now taking the next step on a multi-pronged approach. The first is that we have filed an appeal. So I think a number of you are aware of that. We have essentially sued the FCC in terms of their action, and we'll be going through that legal process, into order. The other thing that we are doing is we are working with our partners in the other rural associations, so PASCO, WTA, and NAGA, in terms of the petition for reconsideration. So we have some efforts underway at the FCC right now to take a look at that. And then we have the further notice of proposed rulemaking, and our goal there is to ensure that the FCC actually adopts a more sustainable and predictable form of recovery mechanism for rural carriers. Now, on that further notice, we're going to be filing a series of comments that are geared towards what we see in that further notice that we think are incredibly problematic. We also have a team of staff who are literally at the FCC daily, working with the FCC, walking through with them what some of the issues and problems are, and really seeking to create a more meaningful Connect America Fund so that rural telcos will feel some incentive and some comfort in actually investing in your infrastructure. We know that the regulatory uncertainty that is teed up by this further notice absolutely is chilling investment. I've talked to a number of you who have stimulus awards, a number of you who simply have investment plans, a number of you who were lucky enough to get fiber relatively quickly, and I know you're feeling a little paralyzed right now. And that's why our work on this order is really just beginning. The further notice is actually the other shoe that has yet to drop. It is that looming piece hanging out there saying that maybe your rate of return will change, and maybe it'll go lower. And I think we have a very unique opportunity right now in that this year is a presidential election year. And presidential election years in Washington, D.C. are always very unique. A little high drama. Congress stops its work a little early so everybody can focus on the national election. But one of the things that we need to do is we need to get to the White House to talk to them about the impact that the further notice has and how it is actually in direct contrast to the President's goals of broadband deployment. The last two State of the Union addresses, the President has talked about how important broadband is. We need to remind him and we need to put right in front of him how this FCC proposed notice and some of the provisions in the order are actually harming his own presidential goals. So while the FCC is an independent agency, we need to look at how we can create essentially a surround sound strategy so that we can have all roads lead to the White House and lead to the president. And that's one of the things that we are working on right now. We are working on how do we get the voice of USDA and RUS that has a $4 billion loan portfolio for rural carriers to weigh in with the president. How do we get the White House Council of Economic Advisors to engage? How do we get the Small Business Administration to see this as a small business issue? And the Office of Management and Budget to understand some potential budget implications, particularly if your portfolios with RUS wind up being unpaid. So we also have to be looking at working with governors and what we can be doing on the ground in the states, working with the states, and frankly, working with the presidential campaign staffs. So this is all part of our strategy. And our message is pretty clear. The FCC just approved this order. The order has a huge impact on our industry. We're still looking at what it means. We're still looking at ways that we can fix it. But we're encouraging them to let the dust settle. Let the dust settle, let us figure out what is actually in the order before assessing the need for any further action. So that's a little bit of where we are going. So to that end, we are going to be asking every member to recommit again to the Save Rural Broadband campaign. I know that a number of you have received our communication that we've sent out. We are doing this again with Opacity and NTCA. But the Save Rural Broadband campaign last year was an incredibly effective tool for us. It allowed us to kind of play with the big boys in terms of getting a real PR initiative out there and doing some public awareness with folks about rural telecommunications and rural communities and the importance of rural broadband. We are going to be looking forward now how this campaign can help us, frankly, in our legal challenges. That's going to be a cornerstone of our efforts this coming year. And continuing the drumbeat in terms of working with the public relations and PR and advertising and all of the different media relations challenges that we have to go through. Last year we raised a little bit over $1 million, and we probably spent about $800,000 on that. Gave us a lot of traction, and I've already been so pleased at how many folks have come back in again the second time around. And I know that it's hard when you kind of feel like you're carrying the weight of the industry. And we've had about 360 companies contribute last year. And one of the things that I think is really important is to see a majority of this industry participate. And you know what? It's not the dollar amount. It's the fact that all of you are engaged and that all of you are engaged in working with us. That support is going to be incredibly important. So again, those of you who have stepped up, we greatly appreciate it. I also want to mention another arsenal that we have in our toolbox that I think is really critical, and that is TCO, our Political Action Committee. And TCO is one of those entities that we've had in NTCA where I can remember being here years and years and years ago, where we were really excited when we raised $40,000. And I am so proud of the TCO board this year for surpassing their goal for 2011 by raising $225,000, which has been incredibly helpful as I talk about working with key members of Congress and talking about really kind of making some very serious political inroads. TCO is a valuable tool that we have that helps us to do that. So I applaud the TCO board for their leadership. We've also been a lot more aggressive about hosting events for members of Congress, really building some key relationships, and TCO has allowed us to do a lot of that work. So that leads me right into the issue of how we raise the visibility of rural broadband in a presidential election year. So now we have another strategy. So we've got a lot of strategies going on, and our policy team has been working extraordinarily hard, but we're calling this our swing state strategy. So what we're essentially doing is we're saying, you know what, the president needs to hear about how important rural broadband is to the economy, how important it is to jobs, how important it is to future infrastructure. We've got the 2012 elections upon us. So what we're looking to do is we're focusing in on some key states where we think that are potentially swing states. They could go either way in the election. And we need to kind of find a way to politically let our message resonate. So we are targeting the states of Colorado and Iowa, Minnesota, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Wisconsin. And we're working individually with our members in those states, We're actually going to have a session this morning at 11:30 in the Manchester room to talk a little bit more about what the strategy is going to entail. But we're really looking at kind of focusing in on these states and getting that message out there. The other group that I've been very excited that we're working with is our vendor community. Our AMAC Council has been terrific about coming to us saying, you know what, this FCC order impacts us as well. How can we get engaged? How can we help advocate? Because you know what, if rural telephone companies don't do well, we don't do well either. So they have volunteered to help us hit the hill, hit policymakers, and talk about the impact on their businesses based on the impact on your businesses. So the other thing we've got going on is next week, Congress is going to be in their winter recess. So they're going to be back home in the States next week. And one of the things I encourage all of you to do is to set up meetings with your members of Congress while they're back home. I'm actually going to call this our stay-at-home fly-in. So you don't have to come to Washington, D.C. You can stay at home, but you get these members of Congress to come to your telco, have them meet with your staff, have them see your operation. I know that it's been hard to really quantify entirely the impact of the FCC order, but some of you have some preliminary numbers, whether it's what happens to other caps or the regression analysis. Share these impacts with your members of Congress. They need to know. They need to understand the implications. We also have prepared a one-page piece for you to share with your subscribers. I think one of the things you're going to have to be thinking about is, as things go on, your subscribers are going to see an impact. How do you start explaining that impact to them now? How do you start letting them understand that it's not you who are making some of these changes, that it's something that's coming down from the federal government? So essentially, I consider this time frame that we're in kind of a 1-2 punch. So we're looking for folks to go ahead and meet with your members of Congress next week, back home, and then we have our March Legislative and Policy Conference. I'm really excited about it. We have FCC Commissioner Rob McDowell who will be joining with us. We had invited Rob to join us at this meeting, but it was Valentine's Day, so he was pretty hard-pressed to fly across country. But he will be joining us in Washington, D.C. for a discussion with me in front of all of you, so it's a great opportunity to ask him some questions. We also have Tom Power, who is the Chief of Staff for NTCA, as well as the Deputy Administrator of the White House Office of Science and Technology, joining us. And USDA has asked to host a stimulus discussion. So for those of you who have stimulus money and you're still trying to figure out what you're going to do to meet some of these deadlines, it's a perfect opportunity to do that. Very briefly on another issue that I just want to call attention to, because while it feels like it's 24/7 USF and inter-carrier comm, we also have been hearing from a lot of you about call completion. And not only have we been hearing about it from you, but sometimes when we call you, our calls don't go through. So we know what you're going through. And we've been working really hard with a number of you who've been incredibly active and engaged. And it was one of those things that we sent a letter last year to the FCC. We had asked them to really push the issue. They held a workshop. The workshop was actually very valuable in that some NTCA members participated, told their stories, actually made the problem real for the FCC. But then the FCC kind of went into a lull. So we were able to kick it back up again and had some help from the Senate, where we had 24 senators who sent a letter over to the FCC. And a declaratory ruling did come out last week. We are very excited about this. I think it's going to be one of those rulings that we're going to have to figure out a little bit more about what's in it, what it means. But there are going to be some fines and some penalties for those who are bad actors. I think it is actually a step in the right direction. And again, to me, this is a classic example of partnership. You all came in, you told your stories, you engaged on the issue, you shared your data. Our Foundation for Rural Service got engaged by putting together a bill stuffer that they were able to distribute out to member telcos, had record reproduction on that piece. And so that you could educate your consumers so they understood where the pressure was coming from. So again, that's another classic example to me of how we can all work together to kind of get the end result that we need. We've also worked with the Congress to establish a Universal Service Rural Caucus, and I'm actually very excited to tell you that we have an NTCA member who will be testifying on our behalf before the Small Business Committee on Wednesday of this week. So there's a lot of other issues that we're taking a look at, whether they're tax issues, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's your funding levels going forward. All of these things are things that we're spending a lot of time working on. Speaking of partnerships, the other thing that I'd like to mention regarding the Foundation for Rural Service is one initiative that they kicked off this year that I think is extraordinarily exciting is they've awarded 6 community grants to do economic development out in your communities. And we had 130 applicants already for the first go-round. So I'm very excited to see what the foundation is going to do in the course of the coming year with the program. Another partnership that I just want to take this opportunity to mention is the partnership that FRS and NTCA have had with JSI. JSI is going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary this year, and when we have our fall conference in Baltimore, which is kind of their home turf, I expect it will be quite a party. But one of the things that JSI has done in recognition and in honoring their parents, Priscilla and John Starlakis, is they have made a contribution to the Foundation for World Service of $20,000 for 4 additional scholarships. And it's not a one-time proposition. JSI has offered to do this on an annual basis. I think it is incredibly generous. It is certainly going to help us in our effort to continue to educate rural youth. We are very excited, and we certainly appreciate their partnership and their support. I also just very briefly want to mention working with your trust committees. I know another part of the component that NTCA has that is so important to many of you is our benefit programs. I have a chance to work with our trustees. These folks work incredibly hard. They hear you loud and clear about your need to have flexible options, cost containment. They hear you, they're working on it. Our group health trustees meet next week. They're looking at numerous things, including how we stay in compliance with the healthcare legislation that has gone through. Our RNS folks, you know, a number of you are probably counting a little too early your retirement dates because the pressures of the industry have been a little too much. But I'm proud to report that our pension plan is now the 444th largest pension plan in the country. Extraordinarily healthy, extraordinarily solid, and great management of those programs. So we are very pleased with that partnership, and it is very important to us. The other thing that we have done, we have a terrific team in Asheville, North Carolina that runs our service center, and those folks are so great, and we have created a new service component so that you can call in. For those of you on the West Coast, we've extended the hours to 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And we've also created a lot of online tools. So for those of you who just want to go in and kind of check on some of your own benefits, we're actually moving very quickly into the 21st century and looking to work with you on a lot of those things. So the other thing I'd like to leave you with is, you know, NTCA staff is so receptive to what you need. You know, your business is changing, your model is changing. What can we do to help you? Whether it's online tools, or it's training, or it's education, or it's different things that you'd like to see from communications. These are all things that we want to try to get out of the box on as well. We want to be looking at the services that you need. We've been doing a live learning center, which I think is really exciting. We have an app that we've continued to develop for these meetings, which I personally find very useful because we're kind of the queen of like a lot of paperwork and bags flying. And so if I can have it actually all on one handy device, I know it helps me enormously. And we've also created an online staff directory. So for those of you who want to go in and kind of figure out who do I need to talk to, we've got a very easy way for you to do that. You can also see a picture. You can start to identify our staff. Because very similar to you, our biggest asset is the staff that we have. And we do have a terrific staff at NTCA. I can't tell you, it really does take a village. Every single person that we have on our team is working so hard on your behalf because they really do live and breathe every member every time. So it is not the time right now to sit back and wait for what's coming. I think it's going to be very important for us to continue to join forces to make sure that every voice out there is heard, that every action has an impact on behalf of rural telecommunications. So whether it's your voice at the White House, whether it's your voice on Capitol Hill, every voice needs to come in and every action needs to contribute to creating the future that we all need. So we will be looking to you for your insights and your expertise, and NTCA is going to continue to lead the charge that we need to create the future that helps your company and your community thrive into the future. So thank you very much for all that you do. We are so excited to be working with you again this year.